The courtroom was dead silent, except for the soft ticking of the clock mounted above the judge's bench. All eyes were fixed on a young black man standing stiffly in his wrinkled dress shirt, his wrists bound in cold metal cuffs. His name was Darius Holt. 28 years old, a former foster kid, a part-time delivery driver with no criminal record. Until now, the prosecutor had painted him as a menace, an aggressive agitator who obstructed justice during a traffic stop when he dared to ask the officer why he was being pulled out of his car. They said he resisted arrest. They said he was combative. They said he shoved the officer. What the footage actually showed: Darius flinching when he was yanked from his seatbelt and thrown to the pavement. But that clip was mysteriously left out of the evidence packet. And now, Judge Ronald Madsen, an old white man with a reputation for making examples, leaned forward with that smug look that crushed 100 lives before Darius ever stepped foot in that courtroom. "Young man," Madsen said, his voice cold as steel, "you've shown no remorse. Instead of accepting responsibility, you chose to challenge authority. This court will not tolerate disrespect for law enforcement. I sentence you to 3 years in state prison, effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the room. Darius's mother broke down, sobbing in the gallery, clutching her Bible. Even the public defender, who had barely spoken up the entire trial, looked stunned. The bailiff stepped forward to take Darius, but that's when everything shifted. Darius didn't move. He stared straight at Judge Madsen, his voice low, steady, and thunderous despite its quiet. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I reject that sentencing and I request the immediate dismissal of these charges under judicial misconduct and racial bias, because you're violating precedent, and I have the authority to say so." The judge blinked confused. "Excuse me?" Darius calmly reached into his back pocket. Ignoring the frantic shouts from the bailiff and the gasps from the crowd, he pulled out a laminated card, a law license, from the bar of the state of Georgia. "I am a licensed attorney, sir. Graduated summa cum laude from Howard Law, clerk for the 11th Circuit, and I've been waiting this entire trial to see if you do exactly what I suspected you would. You overstepped your authority, suppressed evidence, and colluded with the prosecutor to rush a verdict. You didn't know who I was because I chose not to speak until now. I wanted to see how far your bias would go." The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor stood, sputtering. "Your Honor, this is outrageous." This man was posing as a defendant. "I am a defendant," Darius snapped, "because I was racially profiled, assaulted, and falsely arrested. But I'm also the co-founder of the Civil Defense Project, an underground network of attorneys who take on cases like mine from the inside. We fight back. We document the process. We expose corruption from the courtroom floor." Judge Madsen's face went pale. He reached for his gavel, but his hand shook. "This is a stunt," he growled. "This is contempt of court." "No, sir," Darius said, stepping forward. "Contempt is what you showed when you dismissed my rights, silenced my counsel, and ignored the evidence. This entire trial has been a trap, and you walked right into it." At that moment, a sharp voice rang out from the gallery. "Judge Madsen, this is Special Investigator Loretta Kane, Internal Affairs." A black woman in a tailored navy suit stood up, flashing a badge. "I'm placing this courtroom under investigative review. You are to step down from the bench immediately. Bailiff, please disarm the judge." The room went dead again. Madsen looked around, as if the walls were closing in on him. This is a conspiracy." "No, this," Darius said, uncuffing himself as Loretta approached, "is justice." His mother, tears still streaming, stood in stunned silence. The entire courtroom watched in disbelief as the gavel was turned against the judge himself. Darius turned to the stunned crowd. "There are more like me. We've been trained. We're inside the system now, and we are not afraid." The bailiff stepped toward Darius again, hesitating. "So you're really a lawyer?" Darius locked eyes with him. "I'm your worst nightmare." As the judge was escorted out in handcuffs and the courtroom descended into chaos, Darius walked out, free man, law license in hand. But just as he reached the courthouse steps, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Nice performance, Counselor Holt. But you just made enemies in very high places." We'll be seeing you soon." Darius stared at the message, then at the black SUV idling across the street. Windows tinted, engine running, no driver in sight. Darius Holt stood at the top of the courthouse steps, the sun bouncing off the badge of the Internal Affairs officer behind him. But his eyes were locked on that black SUV parked across the street. Windows too dark to see through, engine still running. That message on his phone was still glowing on the screen. "Nice performance, Counselor Holt. But you just made enemies in very high places. We'll be seeing you soon." A chill crawled up his spine, not from fear but recognition. He knew the game he had just stepped into. This wasn't just about a bad judge anymore. It was bigger, deeper, older. Back inside the courthouse, Judge Madsen was still being processed by Internal Affairs, and the media was already swarming in. But Darius didn't even look back. He descended the steps slowly, every sense sharp. A war was coming, and the system was going to fight dirty. As Darius out of the sidewalk, a familiar voice called out, "You good, brother?" It was Marcus Bell, another black attorney from the Civil Defense Project, lean, sharp-eyed, and always watching 6 o'clock. "You flipped the board today, but you know what that means, right?" Darius gave a tight nod. "They're gonna come for us. We just became a liability." Marcus handed him a manila envelope, files on Judge Madsen's old cases. "Unsealed now. You were right. Pattern of misconduct going back over a decade. We're gonna make this public." But before Darius could respond, a screech of tires cut through the moment. The black SUV sped off without warning, almost clipping a pedestrian. Darius and Marcus shared a look. "Somebody's watching," Darius said. "Maybe more than one somebody." Later that night, Darius sat alone in his apartment. The manila envelope spread open on his table. Case after case, names, mugshots, sentencing records. Black men, brown men, poor folks. Over and over, the same script. And the judge wasn't acting alone. His rulings had cleared the path for certain for-profit correctional facilities. A name kept popping up, Lexington Holdings. A shadowy company with ties to private prisons, campaign donations, and Darius froze, judicial appointments. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Another message. "Drop it, or your mother's next." Darius stood up so fast his chair toppled over. He grabbed his coat, rushed to his mother's apartment on the West End, and banged on her door. No answer. He called out, "Mama, it's me." His heart pounding like a war drum. After 3 long knocks, the door creaked open. The lights were off. Inside, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. He stepped in slowly. "Mama?" No response. His breath caught as he saw the living room turned over. Cushions torn, drawers open, paper scattered. Then a soft shuffle from the back. He crept down the hallway. And then, "Mama?" A soft whisper answered. "Darius, I'm okay, baby." He turned the corner and found her sitting on the bedroom floor, shaken but unharmed. "They were here," she whispered. 3 men. I heard them say your name. I hid in the closet when I heard them kicking the door." Darius clenched his jaw. It's not just about Madsen. It's a whole network. And they're scared now. They're showing their teeth. That night, Darius moved his mother to a safe house run by another member of the project. But he knew this wouldn't stop. The higher he reached, the darker the resistance would get. And somewhere at the top of all this corruption, there was someone pulling strings. Someone powerful. Someone untouchable. The next morning, the headlines blared. Judge arrested after defendant exposes corruption. Public demands answers. Madsen linked to private prison profits. AG announces investigation. But while the public celebrated, Darius received another message. A video file. He opened it. It was grainy surveillance footage of his old law professor, the woman who mentored him through the foster system, the one who'd recommended him for the bar. She was walking to her car. Behind her, a tall man in a black coat followed her silently. The video cut off. Then a message. "You want a war? Let's make it personal." Darius's hand shook, but not from fear. From fury. They weren't going after his reputation now. They were going after his past, his people, his roots. He turned to the wall where a whiteboard was filling up with names, arrows, and connections. He picked up a red marker and circled one name in the center, Lexington Holdings. Then he wrote beneath it, expose, every, last, one. And just as he capped the marker, his burner phone rang. One ring, then silence. No caller ID. He answered slowly. A deep voice came through. Calm, cold. You don't know who you're playing with, Mr. Holt, but we know who you are, and we've been watching since you passed the bar. Then keep watching, Darius replied, because I'm just getting started. Darius Holt was done playing defense. He'd spent his life being underestimated. First as a foster kid bounced between homes, then as a black man navigating law school with food stamps in his back pocket, and finally as a defendant standing alone in front of a corrupt judge. But now, with the nation watching and the web of corruption unraveling, Darius had one mission left: bring down the entire machine. And he wasn't going to ask for permission. The news had exploded. Madsen had officially been disbarred. Several of his rulings overturned. Class action lawsuits stacked up like dominoes. But every lead Darius followed kept circling back to one name, Lexington Holdings. And the closer he got, the more dangerous things became. First, it was threats. Then came the break-ins. Then the silence. People who promised to help suddenly backed out. Some got fired. Others disappeared altogether. But Darius had lived through worse. He wasn't built to run. He was built to end it. So he called in a favor. Marla Dean, a Pulitzer-nominated investigative journalist, had been trying to expose Lexington Holding for years, until her editor pulled her off the story. But when Darius showed her the sealed files, the recordings, the missing evidence, they teamed up and they went public. One Sunday night, the two sat in a quiet studio, cameras rolling. Darius wore his best suit, navy with sharp black tie, but his eyes carried the weight of every name in the files. They targeted people like me, he said. People who didn't have the money, the lawyers, the clout. They fed us into a system designed for profit. And Judge Madsen was just the tip of the blade. The video dropped. 12 million views in 24 hours. And then the doors blew wide open. Whistleblowers started calling. A retired warden. A former court clerk. Even a nervous ex-employee from Lexington Holdings with a flash drive full of internal memos that read like mob instructions. Bribes. Blackmail. Fabricated charges. Judges on payroll, politicians in their pockets. It was deeper than anyone thought, but now it was all coming to light. The Department of Justice opened a federal investigation. Subpoenas were issued. Arrests followed. But just when Darius thought it was over, just when he stepped outside the courthouse into the light of a new beginning, he felt it, that same cold gaze, that same black SUV. It pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. Inside sat a man Darius had only seen in blurry photos and redacted memos. Julian Reeve, CEO of Lexington Holdings, impeccably dressed, calm, almost amused. You made quite the mess, Reeve said, his voice silk over steel. I underestimated you. That won't happen again. Darius stepped closer. You built a fortune on stolen lives. It's all coming down. Reeve tilted his head. You think this ends with me? I'm not the top, Mr. Holt. I'm the gatekeeper. There are people above me you'll never see, and they're already rewriting the story. Enjoy your 15 minutes. The SUV pulled away like a ghost slipping through fog. And just like that, Darius understood. He'd won a battle, but the war was ancient, hidden, global. Weeks later, Darius sat in a congressional hearing, testifying under oath, telling the story of how one corrupt judge nearly ruined his life, of how a man with a law license in his pocket had to fight the same system he swore to serve. Lawmakers nodded. Some cried. Others squirmed. But the truth was undeniable now. When he left the Capitol building, crowds cheered his name. Cameras flashed. He didn't smile. He just looked up at the flag above him and whispered, "That's for every brother who never got out." Then his phone buzzed. A new message. This time, no threats, just coordinates. A location. Somewhere deep in Virginia. Attached was a photo. A conference room. 12 men in suits. One seat empty, with a nameplate that read, Darius Holt. No explanation. No sender. Just one line beneath it. You've been invited. His heart pounded. Was it a trap? A threat? Or something else? He stared at the screen. Then, slowly, he picked up his coat. Time to see what they're really afraid of. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And let's keep the conversation going.